Good afternoon. I'm Mike Brownfield. I'm Vice President of Communications at the Goldwater Institute, and it's my pleasure to welcome a very special guest today, Elijah Stacy. Elijah became a best-selling author of a book he wrote at age 17. He founded a nonprofit organization. He's a key opinion leader on Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and he's now producing a movie about his life. He's also an advocate for the Goldwater Institute's right to try for individualized treatments, which is a new law that protects patients' rights to access innovative treatments that are custom-made on their genetics. Elijah is unique because he suffers from a very rare disease, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And more importantly, he's become an advocate to fight for that disease at a very young age, for himself and for all people who are suffering from rare diseases. And that's 30 million Americans. So we're proud to welcome Elijah Stacy with us today. Welcome, Elijah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So Elijah, I want to start by talking about your book, A Small If, the inspiring story of a 17-year-old with a fatal disease. And you can see the cover right behind you. And it's an awesome book. I read it a couple months ago, and I recommend it for everybody watching today. Your book opens with a very scary story. You're in your doctor's office, and you've just been given some terrible news. And you wrote, "This is the first time in my life I thought I might actually die. But I was ready to do the impossible. I was ready to make history." What was it that happened? And what was that history that you were going to make?
Yeah, so with my disease, I have Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which is a progressive muscle wasting disease. So as time goes on, your muscles start to waste away. And that also impacts your back. So I was starting to develop really bad scoliosis. A lot of patients regularly have to have a metal rod inserted into their back to correct that scoliosis. And so here's the story. A few doctor visits ago, my spine started to get worse and worse with the x-rays, but I never really took it serious. I kind of just played it off. But this visit was different. My doctor told me that at this point, he's going to have to put his foot down and really push for me to have the surgery. And so I went back and forth with him and I said, okay, could I just choose not to have the surgery? And he said, you could, but again, he can't advocate for that. Like he, as a doctor, needs to tell me to have the surgery. And I said, okay, wait. I see my mom crying, see my dad with his head down. So I say, wait, can I, if I was able to reverse the shape of my spine right now, make it straighter, could I then avoid having the surgery? And he said, I've never seen anybody do that before. Basically, it's medically impossible. But because I know you, I will give you a small if. And that's all I needed was that small chance, right? And I personally love when people doubt me or say that this thing's impossible or that thing's impossible. That gives me great motivation to go do just that. So I went to physical therapy. I even meal prepped. I did all these different things to give myself the best possible chance to do this impossible or improbable challenge. And 3 months later, I came back and the x-ray showed that my spine was indeed straighter. And to this day, I still don't have a metal rod in my back. So I avoided the surgery.
And I wanted you to start with that story because it really says so much about who you are as a person and your remarkable attitude with which you're approaching life. But before we get into more of that, and I want to talk more about those experiences, let's take a step back and talk to people about what Duchenne muscular dystrophy is. I know you mentioned it briefly a bit, but let's go into that a little bit more in depth.
Absolutely. So Duchenne muscular dystrophy is a fatal muscle wasting disease, as I mentioned. And so the way in which this disease goes is patients are typically diagnosed around ages 5 or 6. For me, it was 6. And the reason this is because you'll notice, your child, if you're a parent, that they'll start falling more frequently, that they're walking on their toes, and things like this. And then around ages 9 through 12, patients become completely dependent on a wheelchair. So they become non-ambulatory. They stop walking. They lose that ability. And from there, they start to notice upper limb function starting to decline, especially in their later teenage years or even early teenage years. It affects everybody differently. It's somewhat of an individualized experience for each person with Duchenne. And we can explain why that is later. But what's so important to note about this disease is that it's fatal. And why is that? Well, that's because the heart is a muscle, which is also going to degenerate as time goes on. And the lungs, the muscles responsible for breathing, is the diaphragm and intercostal muscles. Those skeletal muscles are also going to degenerate as time progresses. And so the average lifespan is 25 with people with DMD, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And the reason this all happens scientifically is because there's a mutation in the largest known gene called dystrophin. And because of that, you're missing a protein that holds up the muscle cells every time that you contract your muscles. So it's kind of like a pillar, is how I like to describe it. And you're missing this pillar. So every time you move a little bit, the roof rips apart and things enter the cell that shouldn't be there. So that's why it leads to muscle breakdown. But that is Duchenne muscular dystrophy, an overview of it.
So in your book, you discuss sort of the first symptoms for you, the things that your parents noticed at first. Um, can you talk a little bit about what those first signs were for them?
Yeah, I think a really good, I'll give you two stories, quick ones. One, I was riding a tricycle. We had like a triathlon at elementary school, and I couldn't really push uphill. And one of my teachers noticed it, but we didn't do much there. My parents, my brother Max, a whole other story. He was in the hospital at the time, and he was a newborn and a lot going on there medically. But that was the first kind of, okay, what's going on? But then what really got my mom's attention is she wanted to measure my height. So she told me to go up against the wall and put my heels down flat on the floor, and I couldn't do it. And she thought I was joking around. She said, "Oh, come on, Elijah, let's get serious, stop messing around." But I couldn't do it. So there, went to the doctors. They started to watch how I walk, started to do blood tests, and eventually did a muscle biopsy and confirmed that I do have Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
So in your book, you tell another story about when you were 9 years old. Your dad was a high school football coach, and he was coaching the All-Star game that year. And tell us about that anecdote and your story, because I think it tells a little bit about how, of course, how the disease was progressing in you, but then also about your attitude and really how you would handle it going forward.
Yeah, so the All-Star game, I was getting really weak, and it's important to note that yeah, my dad was a head football coach. I grew up on the football field since I was basically 5 or 4, learning all my dad's plays and just being around that competitive atmosphere and all of that. And so I was really into it, still am. But I was at the All-Star game, and this time I'm 9 years old. Remember, I'm gonna lose my ability to walk when I'm 11, so you can tell this is, couple years away from losing my ability to walk. So I'm already very weak and struggling to keep up. But I'm on the sideline trying to follow the game and everything. But in this game, we were down 0-28 at halftime, and I can't stand losing. And so everybody looked okay, and whatever, just an all-star game. And so the locker room was far away. And it was uphill, which uphill is really hard to do, walking on your toes. Try it sometime, right? It's very difficult, especially for somebody with DMD. But that wasn't going to stop me because I wanted to get to that locker room and figure out what we're going to do. And so I went uphill on my toes by myself, just found a way to get there. I go into the locker room and my dad sees me and he's kind of shocked, like, how did you even get here? Like, in my condition. And I go and I ask him, so what are we going to do? And that kind of got everybody's attention. And then my dad kind of took it more seriously. They literally started drawing up plays and, okay, you know what, maybe we can fix this. And we actually came back and won that game. So it was incredible, and it's kind of a symbolic of my life of the comeback. When you're down, you never give up. You get back up, and you come back, and you come out a champion.
Can you talk about some of the other challenges that you faced in school as the disease was progressing? Because you talk about some academic challenges and some social challenges. And I'm not asking because I want to dwell on the negative, but I'm asking because, like, in each of these instances and in your book, you've learned lessons and it's helped shape who you are.
Yeah, yeah. So when I was in middle school, a really significant story I think stands out, which is I was being questioned about my intelligence by a teacher. So when I was in elementary school, I had straight A's the last like year and did really well academically and started to come into my academic self. When I went to middle school, I was very surprised because I was placed in a special ed class. And I thought, maybe I was placed there because of my disability. That makes sense. It's kind of under the same umbrella. So when I asked my teacher that, she said, no, no, I think you need to be here as well for academics. So I wanted to get out of that class. She wouldn't let me out of the class, even though my parents wanted me to be as well. And it led to her wanting to bring in a school psychologist to evaluate my IQ. And so I did the IQ testing and whatever, and came up with a very high IQ that let me get out of the class. And so that's just kind of plays on, this belief that because somebody's in a wheelchair, they're not intelligent or they're, intellectually challenged, which is simply not true. And honestly, from my point of view, it's hard to understand that because just because somebody's sitting down doesn't really say anything about their thinking. I mean, um, you're the host right now, you're sitting down, right? So it doesn't change anything from standing up or sitting down, but that was a really significant moment for me. But, making friends and everything like that, I made a lot of friends. I was one of the more popular students. Um, and, I did that by being a person first and not even really concerning myself about the disability. That's not my identity. That's not who I am. It's something I deal with. Sure, it's something that I use to actually teach others, overcome their suffering, but it's not something that defines me, and it's not something I'm trying to make my identity about because that's not me. I define myself by so many other things. So, that's also I think another story of overcoming and perseverance. Overcoming, all the attention you have, but directing that attention to something good, and that's what I did.
Well, and you've become a role model for your brother Kai too, and talk about so Duchenne is genetic, as you mentioned, and talk about how you saw your brother Max suffering, but also now with Kai. So how how has that shaped you? But also how do how is the example that you're given, like giving to them, why or to Kai, why is that important?
Yeah, so I mean, to give a little bit more background on my family, my oldest brother, Will, he's completely healthy. He's a fireman, he's in our military, and he's married, completely healthy, and we're 6 years apart. Then comes me, who would be diagnosed with Duchenne. Then my other brother, Max, who's 3 years apart, he would have Duchenne as well, but we didn't know at the time when he was born, and he would have to have open heart surgery as a newborn. And this surgery has like a 97, 99% success rate, but it didn't go well. And it led to him having a massive stroke, which led to him being cognitively delayed, blind, needing a feeding tube, full-time nurse, confined to his bed his whole life. So severely disabled and very tragic. And, it could be said because he had DMD that his body may not have reacted well to the surgery. He may not have had that surgery if he knew he had DMD, but we're 3 years apart. And unfortunately, Max, he passed away at age 14, and so much can be said about Max. In fact, the only person in my book that has two chapters about them is Max. And so, I say that he's the greatest teacher that never spoke. And I think that really sums up his life. He so many lessons, so many people he impacted. I mean, you come to his funeral and there's 300 people there. That's impressive for a kid that's never spoke, right? And so, um, just great experiences with Max. And as I get older, I miss him more. I think as I mature and as I reflect back, I miss him more. But he greatly shaped my life. I think he greatly shaped my older brother's life. Him being a paramedic and working in fire, and me, getting used to the sights and smells of medicine from an early age, and learning how to sacrifice, put others first. That's because of Max. But then you take Kai, right? So Kai and I were 6 years apart, and he's 17 years old now. And he also has Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And so he's in a wheelchair as well. He's starting to experience some weakness in his arms. And so, it's just a terrible disease. But you ask, well, Elijah, weren't you a role model to him? Yes, it's because, I've gone through the doors of suffering first and he follows, and so I've showed him, how to get in and out of your bed by yourself, how to, the bathroom by yourself, which I've helped engineer so that we can still be independent. And how to view the world, how to think about things, the mindsets, what to do when people think of you like this or that, and how to not even care. I mean, Kai simply does not care anymore what people say to him or think about him when it comes to disability. That's totally irrelevant. It's, if somebody wants to get to Kai or to me, talking about the wheelchair is a waste of your time. That is something that we don't even think twice about. So, um, that's being a role model to him, and using my suffering to help him overcome his suffering.
So there's a quote from your book that I want to read. And it says, "So I don't remember the last day that I walked. Instead, it seems like I just woke up one day and stopped walking. The memories of doing such activities get lost in time." And then you go on to say, "I never focused on how bad being in a wheelchair was because being negative made no sense. I focused on what I could control. I wasn't going to view myself as a victim because being a victim is putting yourself in a situation where you're no longer in control of what happens." And I mean, that's to me, reading in your book, this was a turning point, and you decided all throughout that you're going to take control and that you have a mission. And I'm going to ask you to talk about what your mission is, but first, everybody who's watching us, they're free to ask questions. There's a question box on Zoom, and we'll take a look at the questions throughout, but please submit your questions, and hopefully that we can get to them during our conversation. But Elijah, back to the control that you decided to take and your mission. What is your mission now?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So my mission now is to minimize human suffering and propel human prosperity so that humanity can have a better quality of life. And so what does this mean? Well, it means, like my nonprofit, helping advance medicine and advocating for patients and improving patients' life. This minimizes suffering, right? And when it comes to propelling human prosperity, that's like my book. The experiences that I have, the lessons that I teach in my book, helping people have better mindsets, better ways of tools to overcome their adversity. Things like this propels human prosperity. And when you do both of those things, you create a better quality of life for humanity. And that's really what I want to do. I'm on Team Human. I want humans to have a better quality of life. I want them to, have an amazing life. That's what I spend my whole time doing. So everything I do can be harmonized into that. Even what we're talking about today, I view as a way to advance that cause. And so when I
So
view
Elijah, let's start with your book. So your book was like, would you say that was one of the first big things that you did where you kind of crystallized your vision?
Well, I would say the nonprofit, founded it
So the
at
nonprofit was first.
15 years old. Yeah, 15 years old.
Okay, so tell us about the nonprofit. What's it called? And what is its mission?
So my nonprofit is called Destroy Duchenne, and our mission is to advance treatments to cure Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So yeah, I founded that at 15, and we help out patients as well with our giving program, and just being a player in the game, trying to destroy Duchenne. So that's what we do. I mean, recently we worked with Mark Wahlberg and his clothing company. We honored my friend who passed away. He was an artist who loved Destroy Duchenne and love to donate the proceeds of his art to Destroy to help, fight his own disease as well. And we took his art and we made it into clothing with Municipal, which is Mark Wahlberg's company. And Mark Wahlberg shouted us out on Instagram, and we brought tons of awareness, raised funds, and all that. And so we're constantly trying to do things that are big and notable like that to advance this mission.
I mean, coming up with the idea for that at 15 is really impressive. Like how did your parents react when you thought of this, and your friends in school, I'm sure, like, what was their reaction?
Yeah, well, I was getting really interested in business at the time. Around age 15, I was reading a business book or a biography of someone or personal finance, right? I was really into that whole thing, and I remember wanting to always do something great for the world. I didn't know what, but I wanted to do something great. I just felt it my whole life, truly. But I was attending a fundraiser, and they talked about how Duchenne impacts your upper limb function. And that really hit me hard, when I was reading the booklet, reading this, right? Waiting for the presentation.
Impacts what kind of function, Elijah?
Upper limb, like your arms.
Okay.
So I'm reading that, and remember, my dad was a head football coach. We threw the football around. I played basketball with my friends at recess in a wheelchair, shooting baskets, dribbling, all of that. So to think that, okay, my arms may not work one day, that really hit me hard, but it got worse. The book went on to explain that most patients pass away at age 25. I thought, no, no, that's a mistake. I'm an exception. That can't be me. And no, it went on to explain that the heart and diaphragm are muscles as well, and those will deteriorate. And so that really woke me up. And it said that the disease is incurable. And again, when somebody says you can't do something, I call that rocket fuel in my book. It's great motivation to go and do something. That's what rocket fuel is. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to start a nonprofit. I created the logo in Photoshop. I wrote out a business plan, created the website, and I started asking people that I respect around my community, do you want to be on the board of directors? They agreed, to my surprise. And I did the legal work to make it happen, and my parents thought, yeah, yeah, go for it. And then when I raised the money, they took it a little bit more seriously to pay for the legal fees. My dad admits now, which is kind of funny, that he didn't think I'd get past the legal part. He thought I would just give up and whatever. And I got it done. And so we have a legit 501(c)(3) nonprofit that we created in. And I just want to say this real quick. I think a great quote I heard recently is this, that a healthy person has 1,000 dreams, a sick person only has one. And I think that's really the fuel behind starting this organization.
Elijah, if people want to read more about your nonprofit, what's the website? And if they want to make a contribution, how can they do that?
Yeah, so the website is called destroydushin.org, and I'll spell Dushin because it's very hard. It's Duchenne, and on the website you can donate, which we greatly appreciate, and it's going to go towards advancing this cause of science and also helping people, pay for ramps, wheelchairs that break, bathrooms, vans, all the things that I call a disability tax that you wouldn't have to pay for if you didn't have this disease or were disabled. So we try to bridge that gap to help these families out.
I also noticed on your website that you have a podcast too. And so tell us about who are you talking to on the podcast and what's your goal with that?
Yeah, so we have the Destroy Duchenne podcast, and the goal right there is to tell every story of a person affected by Duchenne. And so that could be a parent, that could be a patient, that could be a teacher, a friend, anyone that has a relationship to DMD and wants to talk about their experience with it. We want them on. Mainly, we've talked to parents and patients. And when it comes to patients, I always want them to start off telling who they are. So we talk about favorite food, favorite sports, favorite books, favorite movies, because human first, patient second, and we do that, and then we talk about the hardships of the disease, and we get real candid. How does it feel knowing that your time is ticking? I mean, that's a real thing that we deal with. And what gives you hope? What gives you optimism? And so we talk about that, and I think it's just really great for people with Duchenne to have a platform to tell their stories, and that's what we try to provide.
So I think along with that, we have a question from somebody in our audience. Joe asks, Elijah, you're so inspiring to so many people, but who or what keeps you going on the tough days? And I think I'm sure that's something that you would share in common with people that you're talking to on your podcast too.
Yeah, this is a great question. And, my answer would be, there's two answers. There's the big why, which, as I mentioned before, is to minimize human suffering, to know the impact, to help humanity, to know that one day. And I get emotional thinking about it because there's been hard times where, I might have had to fly somewhere to help advocate for something. And it's like, I really don't want to do that right now. But to think that a kid won't have to be in this position because of the work that I'm doing, that's what motivates me, that the future generations won't have to go through this. The second, more personalized motivation of mine is my future family. Thinking about, okay, one day I could have a wife, have kids, and to raise them up, that is very, very powerful motivation for me. And I know that, what, I need to be here in order to do that. And so we need to cure this disease. And, I want to take care of my family. And so just working towards that goal helps me push on days that are harder than others.
Can you share some of the stories of other people that you've connected with Duchenne and who maybe like your age? Or I know I saw you speaking, I saw one video on YouTube of, I think you were speaking with a young woman from maybe like the United Kingdom.
Yeah, so I mean, people with Duchenne, I speak to all different kinds of people, and they have many different talents, and something I find really interesting about people with Duchenne, and perhaps it's true of different indications, but they all want to really excel. They all push themselves harder than I would say the average person. So, they learn an instrument or they're one of my friends, he has like a bee business where he, does that and he teaches people about insects, and he has Duchenne. One, is a journalist, and one I met yesterday is literally an attorney who is an assistant to the DA. It's just incredible. You push yourself really hard, and I think that's because they have adversity, and adversity makes people strong and tough. I think that when your life is when you don't have any adversity, I think that I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. I think that the obstacle is the way, right? So I think that's important. In Duchenne, you automatically have that. It's important to note that Duchenne, it never gets better. It never, okay, we'll take this year off. Here's a pause. No, no. Every time it gets worse, and you think that you overcame something, you think you adapted to something, you're gonna have to learn how to adapt to it pretty soon in a different way because it's just gonna get harder. So.
So pivoting a bit to some of your other work, um, you're a key opinion leader on Duchenne. What's the state of research on the disease right now? But then also, what are the prospects of treatment? And this kind of goes along with, what we'll talk about with Right to Try.
Yeah, so I think that, there's a lot of exciting things going on for DMD. And, I'm excited truly about any drug that can help make patients' lives better. At the end of the day, I just want to see patients get better. I want to see them live longer. I want to see them be cured and live a fulfilling, happy life. So really, anything that does that is something that I support. And, we've seen so many more dollars go to research, and so much happen for DMD compared, just like compared to the last decade. So that's very encouraging, and it's very exciting times. I think for the DMD community, especially when you look at all the advances in computer science as well, and the hope that gives patients really of any disease, right? So there's definitely a lot of optimism, a lot of hope, a lot going on for DMD.
So we have a question from somebody else in the audience who asks, what are you looking forward to in the future of biotechnology?
Well, I'm looking forward to curing Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I think that that's huge. I'm looking forward to a lot more breakthroughs again with computer science. I think that that's going to really help us look at all the variables and figure out things that we probably couldn't do by ourselves. And so I really think that we're entering the golden age of medicine, and I think we need to do everything we can to advance that forward. And so I'm looking forward to unbelievable things happening for patients that it just seems like science fiction. That's what I think we're on the verge of, and I don't know if people realize that yet, but let's usher it in together.
Well, and that's the rationale behind the right to try for individualized treatments, which for our listeners, you're probably familiar with our original right to try law, but this is right to try 2.0, where individualized treatments are the kind of treatments that Elijah is talking about, where they're custom made based on people's genes. And because of really a regulatory mismatch with our current system, patients aren't able to access those kinds of treatments, and they can't get past the FDA. So with the right to try for individualized treatments, which is now law in 6 states, and we're working hard to get it passed in many others this year, this gives people like Elijah a pathway to access that kind of treatment, to preserve their right to try that kind of treatment. So Elijah, we're so happy that you're advocating alongside of us for Right to Try 2.0. When did you first hear about Right to Try?
Well, right to try. I remember being 16 or 17, getting real involved with DMD and, learning more about what's going on in just biotech in general. And I remember hearing, under the Trump administration, the first one, the right to try and getting that passed. And I remember being very happy about that because, I like the idea of opening up more medical freedom to patients. I think that's very important and should be celebrated. And it's important. I want our audience to know that, there's no blue disease, there's no red disease, there's only human diseases. And that's why we need to cure them. And so this benefits everybody. It's truly bipartisan. And, I'm just very, very happy and thankful that that was passed.
What do you think about the fact that, you have government standing in the way? And how does that, you as a patient, as somebody who's suffering from a disease, that if there were something that could help you, that you're not able to access that? Like, how does that feel, just knowing that that barrier is there?
Well, it's incredibly frustrating. I would compare it to, considering my dad's a football coach, right? It's like being on the sidelines, not being able to play in the game. At least let me play in the game. Let me get a chance, right? And, there's so much going on. And if my life is at risk, I don't have much to lose. Let me try. If my doctor agrees, if I agree, then let's go for it. Let's do it because maybe it works. For sure, I'm going to pass away at a current state. But maybe it doesn't have to be that way. Maybe something works. Let me try and let's see what happens. I'll live with the results. Instead of say, hey, you know what? You're just unlucky. You're not born at the right time. You're 6 months short. You're 1 month short. That's tragic. Why, especially in the land of the free, in America, we should let patients decide what they want to do. And so I very much support giving even more medical freedom, something even greater to patients, as I think that that choice should be theirs.
You had a chance to make a wish, and you picked a really interesting choice. Tell us who you chose for your wish.
Yes, I picked my business role model, my all-time favorite, Jeff Bezos. I was very thrilled that he agreed to meet me, and it was so fun going to Amazon, the Day One building up in Seattle, and talking to him. And I really look up to him because he's so logical in how he thinks, and he's so long-term thinking, which he prides himself on, which I think that everybody should adopt. Thinking more long-term and trying to be more rational, I think is real important. And the other thing I really appreciate about Bezos, which he doesn't get enough credit for, is how fair he is, how he's willing to talk to those who he disagrees with. And he actually encourages that within Amazon. He wants his fellow staff to disagree and have ideas because he's all about truth seeking. And that's very much me. I'm all about truth seeking. I know I just want to get to what's going to work, what's going to be best, and what is simply true. So it was Jeff Bezos that I got to meet.
So what did you talk about with him? What was the first thing that you asked him, or what out of that conversation go?
Yeah, we talked all about all different kinds of things. We talked about Destroy the Shin and my entrepreneurial spirit. We talked about starting Amazon. One thing that really stands out to me that we talked about is I talked about my why, to minimize human suffering and propel human prosperity. And I asked Jeff Bezos, what do you think is the future going to look like? And he said something very fascinating. He says, he gets that question all the time, but he's more interested in what's not going to change. And he said that what is not going to change for sure is, there's always going to be people that want to minimize suffering and suffering to minimize. And so it was really encouraging to hear him validate my life's mission and to support it, and to think it's good and to say, yeah, you're going to have a lifelong journey of constantly doing work. And that's great because I love it. And so that was something really interested in. We ended on talking about Blue Origin and the future of space and business and all kind of things relating to outer space. And I actually got to go to Blue Origin after we met and go tour it and look at all the spacecraft that they're engineering and working on.
How cool. Would you say, what is he? I'm sure probably the most interesting person, or like the most famous person that you've met through this, right? But who are some others that you've encountered in your journey that have inspired you?
People may not know this, but one that comes to mind is an American philosopher who's brilliant, named Dr. William Lane Craig. He works on like theology and things like that. But again, he teaches the principles of logic and how to think precisely. And I think that that's really cool. And he actually has a disease as well. And so I reached out to him and I left a voicemail. And one day I was just in my room and I got a phone call and he goes, "Hi, Elijah, this is William Lane Craig." And maybe this is embarrassing, maybe not, but I go, "Is this really William Lane Craig?" I just couldn't believe it, right? And so I was so happy that he called. He's definitely a great one. I love different scientists that I've got to meet. I like to talk to people that are just making a difference. I believe it or not, I love to talk to parents, right? I think that they don't get enough credit for what they do. I mean, the life that they live, parents of patients, with Duchenne and other disabilities, other diseases, their view on life and the hardship that they have to overcome and face, it motivates me, and it's just great talking to them, and they don't get enough credit. In fact, I had a parent call me once and say, "Oh, I know you talk to celebrities or whatever, and I'm just some mom." No, that's not true. The whole reason I'm doing this is because of people like you, because of your son. And so they're honestly the real heroes in my opinion.
I mean, with writing your book, how, well, first off, tell us about that. Did you do a book tour, so to speak? I saw you have lots of interviews around it. Like, what was that promotion like?
Well, it was a lot of fun. I was very locked in, very serious, but I remember waking up at 3 a.m. and, my mom helping me put my suit on or whatever, to go talk to a news station in Washington, D.C. And then we're going to do New York. And now I'm going to be interviewed by Forbes. And then we're going to talk to, whoever, and do this podcast and then do that podcast. And then, you're going to go to an in-person event, to, do a book signing or whatever, that was it was a lot of fun, and that's honestly like the kind of life I like to live. I like to be ambitious. I constantly say, my motto is stay ambitious, because I really believe that, when you're just doing life and floating by, yeah, you're alive, but when you really come to life is when you're going after something, when you're ambitious about something. So it's one of my favorite moments in life, and it definitely really accelerated a lot for me.
Elijah, we have a few more questions from folks in our audience. And just as a reminder, um, if you click the question box, you all can submit a question for Elijah, and we'd be glad to take them. Um, Here's a great one. Since you brought up philosophy, who is your favorite philosopher?
Oh, I think that's easy. I think William Lane Craig. But I mean, I like Thomas Aquinas. I like going back to the ancient Stoics. Even I consider myself a Stoic. Epictetus, right? He was considered crippled actually. Apparently, his slave master injured him, and so he lived a life of adversity. In fact, he doesn't even know his name. I mean, Epictetus literally means like unknown, right? And so. I encourage everybody to read his works. It's very practical for the day-to-day living. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, again, another great Stoic. Reading essentially his diary, meditations, fantastic work, really great stuff.
Why does that resonate with you so much, or why do you consider yourself a Stoic?
Well, because they overcome adversity. They talk about it, and one of the biggest pillars of Stoicism is the dichotomy of control. And so, what's in your control and what's not in your control. And to focus only on what's in your control and to recognize that a lot of things aren't in your control. And so that's their focus. Like, I can't control that I'm in a wheelchair. So I don't worry about it. I don't worry about somebody else's opinion. If somebody says, "Well, you're in a wheelchair, blah blah blah, bad, feel bad," I don't even concern myself with it because I can't control what that person says. And when you do that, you really free yourselves from the chains of stress, anxiety, pain. It's very empowering, to the person, when you think that that's a very logical approach to life. So that's why I look up to them, and also just their celebration of virtues, right? They really value that as well. It's a huge pillar of being a Stoic, and so I think that's a really important way, to live your life. I would also say Saint Paul, and other people, I think are definitely role models, and also brilliant in reading their work. So that's who comes to mind.
So we have another question, and I think this probably goes toward you know the philosophy that you've adopted in order to handle life. What does a typical day look like for you? For people that don't understand what this is, what your life is like.
As of right now, my life has gotten harder. And so, I mean, this one really puts it in perspective. Just to get out of my bed is a workout. Just to sit up in bed is a workout because remember, I've weakened muscles, right? And so my core strength is weaker and all that. So it's a workout to just sit up in bed. And then I get myself out of bed independently, which takes about like 20 to 30 minutes now. And it's like a whole workout. It's like telling somebody, hey, you just woke up. All right, go sprint as fast as you can now, and go bench press your personal record, right? That's really what it's like. So there's that. Going to the bathroom is now a challenge, and it takes longer to get out to do the transfer. So you have like just that. Those are you have to sleep and go to the bathroom every day. So like that itself is very difficult. Um, and that's just how and it's not going to get easier. As of right now, it's not going to get easier unless medical intervention happens, which I'm optimistic about and believe really strongly in. But that is the course of a disease, and a lot of other diseases are like this. And so, it's a terrible thing that truly, again, unites us together. Blue and red, it unites us together. Our suffering is what unites us, and we want to all overcome it. So, that's what a typical day looks like in terms of the hardships. But I still try to be productive. I do a lot of different things, working in different industries, and that keeps me busy, that keeps me productive, and most importantly, it keeps me serving humanity, which is the ultimate fulfillment.
So one of those things that you'll be doing is testifying for the Goldwater Institute in favor of the right to try for individualized treatments. So tell us about where are you testifying and what is it that you'll be speaking about?
Well, I've been doing some written testimony so far in South Dakota and Kansas, but I'm going to be doing a remote testimony in Colorado next week. And so I'm very, very excited about that. And I hope I could contribute to the states getting this very important piece of legislation passed because, again, we want to give even more medical freedom. We celebrate everything done so far, but let's go even a step further. Let's go make this even greater, even better. And so I'm excited to contribute to that.
So another question that we have from our audience is what's something that most people wouldn't know or understand about living with a rare disease?
Well, I think, what I always say, and I say it in my book, is that, this is what comes to mind, is that you see a person in a wheelchair, but it doesn't do justice to just how hard life is. Because in terms of Duchenne goes way beyond that. I mean, you have heart problems that could develop, pulmonary issues, so, breathing that could develop. And also, too, like your arms, like people try to high five me or shake my hand. I used to be able to do that. I can't do that now. And that comes as a surprise to people. And so, it doesn't do justice to just how hard life is. And, you don't even think about like you have to have an accessible van or a ramp to get in a house. These are things that people take for granted. Just to eat food, to try and reach for the chip or the bread, that becomes an incredible challenge as well. Again, it's things that people take for granted. So that's what rare diseases do, though, is they make the simple things of life hard.
Another question from the audience, what role has the rare disease community had in impacting your life? And maybe has it helped you learn how to cope with some of these challenges that you're facing? Have others been mentors for you?
Well, I would start off, and it's a great day to ask this question. Tomorrow is a rare disease day, and there's so many of them that will be, flying out to DC and talking to their legislators and advocating for what they want. And, just seeing that the passion and tenacity that they still have to live a fulfilling life, is encouraging. I mean, I met a man yesterday on a podcast I was doing who just got married in April, and I met his wife, and he has Duchenne. Seeing, people celebrate those beautiful milestones in life and still can do great things, that encourages me. And, I look up to them for that.
So with the Rare Disease Day tomorrow, what are something, this is another question from a participant. How can people watching today's webinar support rare disease patients like you, Elijah?
Well, I think taking an interest in this, helping getting legislation like Right to Try 2.0, passed. I think calling your legislators, things like that. I think donating to diseases that you're interested in helping, right? Looking at nonprofits and things like that. I think are a great way to help the rare disease community.
Thinking back in your life, are there people that, of course, maybe talk a bit about how your parents support you, every day, but others, whether it was in school or friends, that are a strong support to you?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
So first off, like maybe in thinking about how you're supported by the rare disease community, how about people in your life who might have been particularly supportive and helpful to you that you're grateful for, and how did they help you?
Easy. My parents, 100% my parents. This is a very easy answer. They've always, they raised me without making me, focus on the disability or focus on the disease even, but raised me like any other child. And that includes going hard on me. You got to do well in school. You got to do this and that, be early, be on time, that is the right way to do it, in my opinion. And I'm very thankful to have the parents that I have to go on this journey with me because truly couldn't do it without them. I mean, imagine if my parents didn't let me start a nonprofit. I mean, this whole conversation doesn't even exist. So I have to give them the credit. I also would thank my brothers. I'd also thank my friends. Just treating me like anybody else and pushing me and expecting greatness out of me. And I appreciate that.
Another great question from the audience. If you could change one thing about the healthcare system, how it works for rare disease patients, what would it be?
Um, Well, I think again, letting patients have more freedom to choose what they want to do, I think is honestly really important. I mean, what I would say to the audience is imagine yourself, you're told that you got a month to live, a week to live, a day to live. Wouldn't you want to do something? Wouldn't you want to at least go throw the Hail Mary? I mean, so, just throw it up and see what happens. Doing nothing is a guaranteed outcome. We know that outcome. Doing something is a chance, and that's all we can ask for is a chance.
So in your book, it's really brilliant how you write about these personal experiences that you've had, good and bad, and you also have lessons that come from them. What are what are some lessons that you wish everybody could understand from your book or otherwise?
Yeah, I think I mean there's so many. I mean I I love all the lessons, but I think the self-image is really important. I talk about that. How you see yourself, right? I don't see myself as a disabled person, but a person with a disability, and that's an emphasis on person first. I'm a businessman, I'm an investor, I'm a key opinion leader, I'm a founder, I'm a friend, I'm a Christian, I'm an intellectual. Like this is how I see myself. Disability is way low on the list. That doesn't really even matter. So I think that's a really important lesson because, just to put it practically, if you see yourself as low self-esteem and insecure, you will do that. But if you view yourself as confident, you will be confident. And so I think that's a really important lesson. I think, dichotomy of control, as we talked about earlier, focus on what you can control and disregard what you cannot. Very important, would lead to a lot of practical benefit for people. Prioritizing your character is the last lesson of the book. And that's a very important one. You need to do the right thing no matter what. The right thing is the right thing. And when you do that, typically good things happen for you. And most importantly, though, is that you feel good, you feel fulfilled, you feel a clean conscience, and that's a life worthy of living. And so all these different lessons, I mean, we talked about rocket fuel, using people's negative energy and thoughts and doubts to propel you. We talked about staying ambitious, right? These are the lessons that make up the book. So it's hard to pick one that's best.
Elijah, another audience question is, what does waiting feel like? Waiting for treatment, waiting for hope.
It's terrible. You want this to end, um, and it's actually hard to imagine when something actually does happen. I mean, to talk more about the individualized treatments. I mean, when you look at Duchenne, we mentioned that it's because of a mutation. Well, there's 79 different exons that make up the dystrophin gene, and so exons are coding regions, right, that make up the whole gene. And so some drugs they work for certain exons, but for most people they don't, and I'm one of those people where they don't work, and so that's very hard to not have anything for yourself, but staying hopeful and optimistic and believing better days are ahead. That's encouraging, but the wait is certainly hard.
So another great audience question is that you've accomplished so much at a young age. When you're not changing the world, what's your favorite way to just be Elijah and have fun in life?
I love sports tremendously. Basketball, football. Honestly, I love going to any event in person, any sports in person. Just the energy is great, the competitiveness, I love it. I'm the kind of guy when it comes to sports, I love when they fight a little bit, talk a little trash. That I love that stuff. That's great. Eating a good meal, being with friends, laughing, being with my family. These are great ways. I love reading. I love being challenged, like learning new things. I genuinely enjoy that, but honestly, I enjoy working. Like it's fun to me, genuinely. So like, doing this today, it's like, yeah, this is something to look forward to. I can't wait to do it. This is what I consider fun as well.
So what are some of the next things that you have coming up, Elijah?
Well, we're producing a movie, which I think is going to be tremendous. I think it's going to really impact the world, inspire so many people, and
So how did that come about?
yeah, so I was doing a media interview, and the really cool story is one of the producers, he went to the same high school as me. And so he recognized the high school because I was doing an interview with my book signing at the high school. And he said, "Wait, that's my high school. Who is this?" He looked at the story and he said, "This is unbelievable." He sent it to the other producer, who was Emmy nominated, really talented writer, really amazing guy. Said, "We got to get on this guy." And we talked, and now we're working on this. Now we have a whole screenplay done, and we're going down that whole development process. And I'm learning so much what it means to be a Hollywood producer, and it's just fun to be in that industry as well. So I think when this film comes out, people are going to just really take a lot from it because what it does is it expands upon my book. It tells my family story in such a unique and beautiful way, and I think that's honestly a big thing that's needed in America is the family unit. Let's celebrate it. Let's make let's make the family unit great again, right? Let's do that. So I can't wait till people see the movie.
What are some of the so you have so many stories about your family and how they've supported you in your book. So thinking about your movie that you're producing, like what would be like the one story that really captures what your family is all about?
That's hard. You know, what comes to my mind right away, which may not be what people would assume, but I think it's Max. I think it's Max. I think it's when it was 4 a.m., 3 a.m., 2 a.m., whatever, sound asleep, and you hear walkie-talkies and sirens. What's going on? And you wake up, oh, Max is being rushed to the hospital. All right, everybody, let's go into, soldier mode. I'll stay with Kai or we'll go to the hospital. We'll just be in the waiting room, and fall asleep at like 5 a.m. in the car and just kind of coming together and everybody doing their part to make it happen, out of love for each other, out of love for Max. Um, I think that's really what defines us is we stick together and we make things happen no matter what.
You shared with me earlier today when we were chatting um, a statistic about how many people suffer from rare disease. And why don't you share that with our audience today? Because I think it's so important for people to understand the scope of why the fight for the right to try for individualized treatments is so important and why your story is just one of so many of people like you who are suffering.
Yeah, so there's 30 million Americans who have a rare disease. And what I read today, I read a report that said that 30% of them under age 5 pass away. That's horrendous. I mean, that's terrible. We have under age 5. I mean, I don't, what is that? Not even in first grade yet, just starting first grade. That's terrible. So, when you look at drug development, it takes about 10 years on average to develop to get approved. We need to go faster. And considering how great technology has advanced, especially in bio, there's just so many more options, so many more things coming to be a valuable or viable solution that may or may not help. And so when I just think about that, I want to give these little kids a fighting chance, considering how terrible it could be. So that's important.
Elijah, why are you hopeful for them and why are you hopeful for your life too?
Well, I'm hopeful again because there's just so much going on. There's so much investment, which is important. You need the money to do the science. There's so much being done scientifically, so many brilliant minds. Again, I think it's worthy noting AI. Artificial intelligence is a new technology that can be used for good, and we should use it for good to come up with cures and treatments that help improve patients' lives. And that really just speeds up development and tremendously, and we need that to happen so that we can minimize these people's suffering. So um, that's why I'm hopeful, and I am a believer in God, and so I believe that God has a plan for everybody's life. So when you ask me personally about my life, I think that there's a plan, and if I don't end up being cured, so be it. That's the way it is. I did my part, and if I get cured, also so be it. Praise God. Um, I accept whatever the plan is. I
Well,
hope,
Elijah,
though, I get to stay here longer. That's my personal preference for the plan.
well, Elijah, that's why we're so happy that you're with us today, that we can talk about this fight together and for the right to try and to help you and to help so many others like you. And another shout out for your nonprofit, Destroy Duchenne, which people can visit at destroyduchenne.org. If folks want to learn more about Right to Try, they can visit us at righttotry.org. And then also, if you want to support our work at Goldwater, goldwaterinstitute.org/donate. But Elijah, thank you so much, and I'll give you the final word today.
Well, that's well, first of all, thank you so much for having me and for all the work that you guys are doing. And just want to say that everybody I've ever interacted with at Goldwater has been so kind, so passionate, and you guys are just a really amazing set of people. But I think my final word today is to keep going no matter what. Help make a difference. Maybe you don't know what it is, but you want to make a difference. Well, you found one with what you heard today. Call your legislator. Let's get this done. Let's get this passed and overcome your adversity. And as always, stay ambitious.
Thanks, Elijah. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and have a great day.